It was April 5th, 2015. 39-year-old British Army Captain Victoria Cilliers was full of excitement as she geared up to skydive over her beloved English countryside. With over 2,600 jumps under her belt, this was just another day at the office for the thrill seeker. But little did she know this particular jump would change her life forever. Victoria, a vibrant and adventurous woman, seemed to have it all: a loving husband, Emile, a caring father to their two beautiful children, and a life filled with excitement. But as we all know, things aren't always as they seem from the outside looking in. Her husband gifted her this specific flight, but behind the thoughtful gesture was a motive no one saw coming, not even her. Victoria Cilliers was about to plummet into every skydiver's worst nightmare. Welcome to the extreme edge. On Easter Sunday, April 5th, 2015, Victoria's heart filled with joy and gratitude for the gift her loving husband gave her: the jump at the Netheravon airfield in Wiltshire, England. Emile Cilliers was also in the British Armed Forces and served as a sergeant in the British Army. At the time, the relationship had been experiencing a rough patch, like any marriage. The gift seemed like a chance to reconnect and rekindle their love for one another. But little did Victoria know, beneath the surface of this kind gesture, a chilling plot was brewing. One that she wouldn't realize until it was already too late. It was a typical spring day in Britain. A gentle breeze whispers through the valleys, carrying the scent of damp earth and burgeoning wildflowers. The chirping of birds fills the air, and the fields, once brown and barren, are now a vibrant tapestry of emerald and gold as crops begin their ascent towards the sun. Victoria, filled with anticipation, couldn't have chosen a more perfect day for her skydiving adventure. Arriving at the airfield, she eagerly began her preparations. She put on her jumpsuit, secured her parachute, and ensured everything was in place before being guided to the waiting plane. Moments later, she was strapped into her seat as the pilot began to move down the runway slowly. The cramped cabin vibrated with the roar of the engine, and the small plane began to leave the ground. Sunlight passed through the windows, illuminating the inside of the cabin. Victoria likely took a few deep breaths in an attempt to quell the butterflies in her stomach. As the seasoned skydiving veteran looked out the tiny window, she saw the vast green landscape of the British countryside. The roaring sound of the engine, combined with the wind rattling against the side of the small aircraft, might have further increased her nerves and excitement. She was no stranger to this. She'd done this many times before, and this was how she loved to relieve stress. As the plane slowly ascended through the air, it began to level off. This was the moment when Victoria started to move closer to the plane's door, inch by inch. The pilot, a weathered man with a calm demeanor, then gives a thumbs up from the cockpit. Following this, the door slid open, revealing a vast expanse of blue. The wind rushed in, tugged at her clothes, and whipped her hair. She moved to the edge of the plane, looking to the ground below, and she jumped. A surge of exhilaration and joy likely came over the experienced skydiving lover as she leaped out towards the ground below. For a few precious seconds, it's pure, unadulterated freefall. As she descended towards the ground, the sensation would have been unlike anything we experience in our daily lives. The wind screaming past her ears, the earth hurtling towards her, and the overwhelming feeling of freedom. This unique sensation, a feeling that can only be experienced in the sky, is what draws many to the thrill of skydiving. She probably released screams of euphoria along with some giggles. As Victoria rapidly flew like a bird back to the ground below, a smile likely came over her face, and she fully embraced the thrill of free-falling. Many enthusiastic skydivers claim that in that moment, all of life's worries fade away, and all that's left is the moment. She carefully monitored her altitude, and when the time came to pull her chute, tragedy struck. Tiny detour on this chaos train. If you want more raw, uncut stories we can't show here, come join the Extreme community on Patreon. See you on the real Extreme Edge. As Victoria plummeted to the ground at speeds of over 60 miles per hour, her parachute failed to open. Having trained for this exact moment, she didn't hesitate and quickly severed the main chute before trying to deploy her backup. But even her backup chute failed to deploy. At this point, we can only imagine the overwhelming fear and anxiety that took over Victoria's mind. The sheer helplessness of the situation. There was nothing more she could do. Have you ever had one of those nightmares where you feel yourself falling through the air? You're kicking and flailing and feel totally helpless as you fall, and as you're panicking, you know you're about to hit the ground, and you wake yourself up, gasping with the sheets trapping you like a mummy? Maybe that's just me. But this was the harsh, unforgiving reality for Victoria that day. We can only imagine the sound of the wind screaming past her ears. As she fell to the ground, it became a blur of green and blue. She just leaped from a plane, becoming a tiny speck against the vast canvas of the sky. The initial rush of adrenaline was intoxicating, a cocktail of fear and exhilaration. She was free from all the problems of life, not having to think about the current issues in her relationship. For a brief moment, she was a bird soaring through the heavens. But then all of this freedom was snatched away in a heartbeat. What if the very thing designed to bring you safely back to Earth betrays you? When Victoria's parachute failed to deploy, her life was turned upside down. Now she was spinning, disoriented, and the ground was rushing up to meet her. This is a skydiver's worst nightmare, and that's exactly what happened to Victoria on this terrifying spring day in Britain. She fell to the ground at over 60 miles an hour. There was little she could do to slow down. Victoria had nothing but a few short moments to accept her fate. A fall from this height most likely meant instant death. As she plummeted 4,000 feet to the ground below, those gathered at the landing area watched on in horror. One individual who saw the entire ordeal firsthand was Rob Camps, who served as the club's secretary at Netheravon Airfield. The entire event must have seemed like an eternity for Victoria, but in reality, it was over in a matter of seconds. According to Rob, who later said, it was pretty sickening watching it. Despite the catastrophic failures, Victoria, with her extensive skydiving experience, managed to slow her descent and steer herself away from a nearby tarmacked road. She landed on a soft, newly plowed field. Unfortunately, there was nothing more Victoria could have done, and she collided with the ground at an immense speed. Rob and several others rushed to Victoria's aid, fully prepared to accept the idea that she was dead. They even brought a body bag with them. When they arrived at the scene, Rob detailed the state she was in, explaining, "She was very pale. I couldn't see any rise and fall in her chest. I just had this dread that this is a corpse." With heavy hearts, the medical personnel inched towards the body to inspect it, and were astonished to discover she still had a pulse. Victoria's survival was nothing short of a miracle. Now, it became a race against the clock, as she was rushed away to a hospital where doctors would try to save her life. When told about how she sustained her injuries, the doctors were astonished, as falls from such an immense height often result in instant death. When examined, they discovered Victoria suffered several internal injuries and spinal injuries, as well as a broken pelvis, 5 broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. According to medical reports, her slim build and the softness of the recently plowed field that broke her fall ultimately saved her life. However, this raises an important question. How did something like this happen? All parachute equipment is thoroughly checked to ensure it is in proper working condition. While the primary chute can malfunction, the chances of both failing to deploy are certainly rare. The Army Parachute Association, recognizing the unusual nature of the parachute failures, immediately contacted the police. After spending some time recovering, Victoria later managed to provide her own version of the terrifying jump that nearly claimed her life. Speaking with investigators Paul Franklin and Maddie Henna, she detailed every moment of the day, leading the authorities to at first suggest it must have either been some kind of freak accident due to equipment failure or even a suicide attempt. Initial assumptions of a tragic accident were quickly challenged when the Army Parachute Association, led by Chief Instructor Mark Beata, noticed irregularities with Victoria's equipment. Specifically, the slinks, which connect the harness to the parachute, were missing from the reserve parachute. This, coupled with the tangled main parachute lines, pointed to deliberate sabotage. With this discovery, alarm bells began to ring, and it was beginning to look like this seemingly freak accident might have had more sinister means. But who would do this to suggest a revered member of the community and a British military captain? Paul and Maddie delved into their investigation and talked with everybody who knew Victoria. Speaking about the first time she sat down to talk with the suspect, Maddie Henna claimed Emile made her feel very uncomfortable from the get-go. In one interview, she said, "He was supremely confident. To be that supremely confident did not feel right." So, their attention was swiftly drawn to Victoria's husband. The more they learned about Emile's life, the more it became apparent that it was far from perfect. Soon, he emerged as a prime suspect in their eyes. Emile was born in South Africa in 1980, but moved to the UK in his 20s, where he met his first wife, Carly. However, what appeared like love at first sight eventually burned out, and the pair got divorced. Emile met Victoria for the first time in 2009. She was a physiotherapist working at an army base, and he was a physical training instructor in the Royal Artillery who had injured his knee in a skiing accident. Their relationship blossomed with an intensity that was hard to ignore. Victoria, in her mid-30s, was drawn to Emile's piercing blue eyes and alpha male personality. She had been married before, but this time, she was sure she had found the perfect partner. They married in South Africa in 2011 and had 2 children together. The early years of their relationship seemed perfect, and outsiders envied the apparent closeness the couple shared. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect union, cracks were beginning to appear, and Victoria soon began to worry about Emile. The investigators discovered a trail of debt. According to their report, he spent a considerable amount of Victoria's money, often making excuses for his financial troubles. On top of this, he would disappear for extended periods of time. But despite the red flags, Victoria remained trapped in the relationship. Like many victims of coercive control, she found it difficult to break free. Even with his undesirable personality, what the investigators began to suggest seemed almost impossible to Victoria. They were under the impression it was Emile who had tampered with her parachute in a deliberate attempt to claim her life. She and her husband had their problems like many other couples, but could he really have planned to murder the mother of his child in cold blood? This is where our tale takes a disturbing turn. This is not just a story of survival, it's a story of betrayal, of a husband who sought to end his wife's life and the extraordinary circumstances that led to his downfall. As the investigation continued, the police uncovered a shocking truth. This wasn't the first time Emile had tried to murder his wife. Less than a week before the skydiving incident, he had tried to cause a gas explosion at their family home in Amesbury, Wiltshire, endangering Victoria and their 2 children. His plan was cunning. He turned on the gas tap and allowed it to spread throughout the home, hoping that something would set it off and cause a devastating explosion. Fortunately, Victoria smelled the leak and managed to get herself and their 2 children to safety, but they probably shrugged it off as an unintentional accident. But what would possess a man to not only endanger his wife, but also their 2 children? Well, as you might have guessed, there was another woman. His phone data showed that the father of Victoria's children was having an active affair with another woman known as Stephanie Golder. He even promised to marry her, somehow. This isn't even the worst part. Emile was accused of sending inappropriate messages to a friend's daughter. After a lengthy and thorough investigation, the authorities concluded that Emile was not who he said he was. In fact, he was a sociopath who would stop at nothing to get his way. The investigators discovered he was swamped with debt. Hoping to free himself from this, he took out a life insurance policy on Victoria, which she knew nothing about. If for any reason she'd die, he was set to receive a substantial payment of around £120,000, which is approximately $165,000. Now, everything was starting to make sense to the investigators. In time, they began to connect the dots with the help of the evidence they had collected, and with their expertise, they found a clear motive for Emile's alleged actions. The death of his wife would not only solve his financial problems, but it would clear the way for him to run away into the sunset with his new mistress. During one of many interviews with the police, Emile's words carried a heavy emotional weight. He said, "I love her, and she's the mother of my children, but it's not a marriage I want to be in anymore." This makes me wonder, has he heard of something called divorce? Well, try not to laugh, but he was worried that a divorce from a higher-ranking member of the military would have a detrimental effect on his career. It seems to me that he didn't want the marriage, but wanted the money out of it. The police investigation was thorough, uncovering the extent of Emile's deceit and the lengths he went to orchestrate Victoria's death. The evidence against him was overwhelming. In the end, they discovered what had really led to the malfunction of Victoria's parachute on April 5, 2015. Emile had deliberately tampered with it in the toilet before the jump. With this, the authorities had heard enough. Emile Cilliers was immediately arrested and charged with attempted murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Victoria initially defended her husband and was still reluctant to believe he was capable of such actions. Emile Cilliers was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of damaging a gas fitting at their home. The first trial, held in October 2017, ended with the jury failing to reach a verdict. However, a retrial was held in May 2018, and this time, the jury found Emile Cilliers guilty on all 3 charges. The evidence presented during the trials was compelling, painting a clear picture of Emile's calculated and callous nature. Sentencing judge Mr. Justice Sweeney described Emile's actions as wicked offending of extreme gravity and stated that he was a person of quite exceptional callousness who will stop at nothing to satisfy his own desires. The weight of the evidence was undeniable, and when the hammer dropped, Emile was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. He is currently serving his sentence at HM Dovegate Prison in Staffordshire. In the months that followed, Victoria finally realized she had been the victim of a sadistic scheme all along, and in December 2018, she filed for divorce. The aftermath of the attempted murder was a long and heavy journey for Victoria. She had to recover from her physical injuries and deal with the emotional trauma of betrayal, which left her feeling vulnerable and distrustful, all while navigating the complexities of divorce and single parenthood. After the divorce, Victoria focused on rebuilding her life. She found solace in her work and her passion for skydiving. Despite the immense challenges she faced, Victoria demonstrated incredible resilience. She refused to be defined by her husband's actions and has since remarried another skydiving enthusiast, Simon Goodman, in a simple ceremony. In time, she even managed to work up the courage to return to skydiving. A powerful act of defiance and a testament to her determination to reclaim her life. Speaking on the decision, she said, "Jumping was an integral part of fixing that. It was as if I had to overwrite my memory of the fall. I had to jump again to put my history behind me." Victoria's life is truly a testament to resilience in the face of adversity. Despite surviving and distancing herself from Emile, he continued to try to exert control over her in the years that followed his conviction. Obsessed with money, he sought a share in the equity of their former family home once it was sold. This ongoing legal battle highlights the lasting impact of his actions and the challenges Victoria continues to face. The case of Victoria Cilliers is a complex and disturbing one involving attempted murder, betrayal, and the resilience of the human spirit. Emile Cilliers' actions were driven by greed, selfishness, and a complete disregard for human life. However, Victoria's survival and her subsequent recovery are a testament to her strength and determination. The investigation, trials, and eventual conviction of Emile Cilliers brought a measure of justice to this extraordinary case. Victoria's story continues to inspire and serve as a warning about the dangers of coercive control and the importance of seeking help when faced with domestic abuse. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.